Donald Trump has been busy with this list of people who are going to be inhabiting his new administration. Of course, we've known for a couple of days that he has named that Susie Wiles as the chief of staff, and she's got her act together. I mean, you can say what you want about Susie Wiles. In fact, I could say a few things about Susie Wiles. She has been an extremely effective political operative historically. I want to say Rick Scott is really her guy. She made Rick Scott into a senator from being just a businessman who ripped off the government in the biggest Medicare fraud in our nation's history. So she took Rick Scott, this businessman, and made him a senator. There she is. Now, she is immensely competent, and she did run the campaign for Donald Trump. She's a longtime Washington person and worked on the presidential campaigns of Reagan, for example, and George H.W. Bush. And out of the spotlight, she is doing a lot and continues to do a lot for Donald Trump. So she'll be the White House chief of staff. Stephen Miller will be the White House deputy chief of staff for policy. And of course, we know about Stephen Miller. Send the illegals back home. He said America is for Americans, all of that stuff. I mean, it's a very draconian view of immigration, and immigration is a nuanced issue, even if you understand, as we all do, that secure borders are an important thing. The way in which you can really cut off the illegal immigration stream, probably, and I've never said this before on this show, but it's of course obvious, is you need to have employer sanctions. People come here for economic opportunity, and they also are, believe me, fleeing many other, it used to be purely economic opportunity. Now they're fleeing many situations that are life-threatening to them, right? I mean, and now increasingly there are climate refugees, et cetera. But more to the point, if you are really serious about getting people out of this country who are working in the American system, in restaurants, in slaughterhouses, in agricultural concerns through the Central Valley, picking strawberries and everything else that they're the backbone of the agriculture business in California. If you're really serious about it, you would penalize the employers, not the employees. You would sanction the employers. Going in and raiding a slaughterhouse of a bunch of people who are here illegally, that's not really, and deporting them, that's not really an effective way to reduce immigration illegally to this country. So we know you're not serious about going after the people who own these businesses, right? Who own these huge mega farms, who own the slaughterhouses, who own the restaurants. You don't want to go after them. So you go in and you grab, Julio and Paco, you throw them on a bus, and now you take a victory lap. Sorry, I think it's bad policy. But you may say, hey, Mark, we do need it. I agree. But my father actually was very instrumental in the 80s in crafting legislation about immigration that involved the sanction of employers. That's the only way to have a chilling effect on this. But the reality is something much different, isn't it, everybody? We all know what the reality is. The reality is you need these people. The reality is you are building your economy on the backs of these people, even as they hurt overall wages because they work for so much less. Employers are desperate for them for that same reason. Anyway, moving on, we can continue.
You had a lot of substance there with Miller. I just have, every time I see that guy, one word comes to mind, a feeling, and it's slime. He's slimy.
Yeah, he's doesn't have a lot to recommend him. He's definitely he's a hardliner with an ugly policy. So when you look at him and you can see ugly in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Marco Rubio will be Secretary of State. I mean, Marco Rubio is someone, in the Senate who has dealt with international relations, but I mean, he's a hardliner. He's also someone who disagrees with Donald Trump on Ukraine policy. So I'm sure, as an ass kisser, he'll come around to Donald Trump's way of seeing the world. But I'm just saying, if you really were looking at the underpinning philosophy of Marco Rubio, it's not in lockstep with Donald Trump's.
Whose wife did Trump make fun of? Was it Rubio's or Cruz's?
Ted Cruz, yeah.
And
Ted
so
Cruz.
it's Rubio. He just called him Little Marco, right?
Little Marco. Yeah. I mean, he humiliated. I sent you that though, Albert, didn't I? I sent you the video of Marco Rubio on the stage with I know I'm hitting you with this, we didn't talk about it, but I did send it to you. Marco Rubio on stage with Donald Trump at a campaign debate or something, in which he said, do you know what Donald Trump would be doing if he weren't given $200 million by his dad? He'd be selling watches on Fifth Avenue. That's what Marco Rubio said.
He's selling watches on eBay anyway,
yeah,
or
right.
whatever.
But I'm just saying, these guys have come a long way from where they were. Elise Stefanik, the ambassador to the United Nations. And this is, again, these are loyalty appointments.
To be a diplomat to do that?
She has no diplomatic experience.
You don't have to be nice to people in other countries.
Very little foreign policy experience. This is a position, and you can say, hey, the United Nations isn't worth the real estate that it's built on. Okay. But if you're going to have an ambassador to the United Nations, usually they have some kind of diplomatic or foreign policy experience. She has very, very little. So that's a loyalty post. Tom Homan is the border czar. He is the former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And, there was no border czar. There is no position of border czar. They gave Kamala Harris that title, border czar. And they wanted to tag her with everything that was a problem at the border, right? So now they call Homan the border czar to contrast essentially Kamala Harris and Homan. It's a way to kind of own the libs in another way because he's so hardline. Now, he does have experience because he was director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, so he has some, as I say, experience at the border and with border policy. But he is someone who is quoted as saying that Democratic governors who obstruct his efforts to raid and deport should get the hell out of the way, warning of unnamed consequences if they don't.
People are scared.
Really? I see why. Mm-hmm. Lee Zeldin, because I'm a tree hugger, this is something that I pay a lot of attention to, who runs the EPA. But you may not be a tree hugger, but you may, I don't know if you drink water or breathe air, but if you drink water or breathe air, you should care who runs the EPA. You should care about the fact that the Supreme Court overturned that Chevron deference case, which was the way in which the EPA had the stout legal control of regulations on air and water toxins. What can go into the air and water and your soil? That is controlled by the EPA. And this guy, Lee Zeldin, is the new EPA administrator. He has been a congressperson from New York, and he is going to be charged with, and Trump has said this, passing fair and swift deregulatory decisions. He is someone who is very much in the thrall of business and of deregulation. When asked about the environment, he talked about U.S. energy dominance and the American auto industry and how regulation has to be removed from those areas of business. Well, that is not the environment, okay? Oil drilling and the auto industry is not the environment. What you can do for the environment through the EPA is done through regulation, protections on water and on air toxins. And I'll remind you, in the first Trump administration, the water levels were reaching critical thresholds with toxins. And the Trump administration said they weren't meeting the clean water standards that the federal government had laid down. And what did the Trump administration do? They said, no problem, we'll just raise those thresholds. So now whatever toxins are in there still don't exceed the federal thresholds, and you guys are fine. That's the kind of thing you can look forward to. They will give you the crap about how we have the cleanest water on Earth, we have the cleanest air on Earth. It's just not, A, it's not true, and B, it's going to be further degraded with this appointment. Mike Waltz is the National Security Advisor. He is a retired Army National Guard officer, war veteran. I think the big story is Kristi Noem. She's going to run the Department of Homeland Security. You know her because she was probably going to be on a final approach course to be Donald Trump's running mate, I'd suggest.
And then the whole dog shooting incident delayed that, derailed that. Yeah.
Exactly. She had a little hiccup when she wrote in her book how she delighted and even bragged after killing the puppy. You know, it was a year and a half old, I believe. You know, that's a bad brag in pretty much any forum, but when you're running for public office, it's a really bad brag. No contendo, unqualified folk hired. Others call this DEI. Oops. Yeah, right, exactly. How many of these posts are DEI hires? And you could argue this is one. So she has no experience here. I have no idea what the hell Kristi Noem is doing in this game, except for the fact that she was such a staunch supporter of Donald Trump. And she's going to be working with Stephen Miller as the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. I mean, it's a huge job. And again, I'll remind you that this is someone who, even within South Dakota, and South Dakota is not a populous region. I mean, it's a small state from the standpoint of the number of people who live there. She was banned from entering indigenous tribes' land. That's about 20% of the state of South Dakota. She was banned because she baselessly started accusing tribal leaders of cooperating with Mexican drug cartels. That was one of the accusations she made, a very high profile. And literally, the indigenous people who live in South Dakota, they're not small in number. They clap back, and she got that ban.
So she's crazy then.
She's also, and this you may feel as though it's a little salacious, but you may like salacious. She was having, and maybe you can get me information on this, Kim or Albert, you're really good with the salacious stuff.
Google it.
I'd say Kristi Noem and her affair with Corey Lewandowski is something you want to look at. And the reason I say you want to look at it is not just because it's sort of tee-hee, they're having an affair. You know, I don't really care about that. You have as many affairs as you want. Corey Lewandowski was basically nailing everybody in the White House. He was, there were like a list of these women who he was going nuts with, which is, hey, great. I mean, if you can work it in between whatever other crap you were doing, great. But what I point to is the way in which, as Secretary of Homeland Security, she can shovel a bunch of stuff to Corey Lewandowski. I mean, she can shovel contracts. She can shovel all kinds of, there are all kinds of ways in which you can enrich certain people when you're director of Homeland Security. We talked a bit about it yesterday, the no bid contracts, where you just sort of assign contracts to various people and entities. I'd look for a lot of that from this administration. So that's the deal on Kristi Noem. Mike Huckabee, of course, ambassador to Israel. I think you saw a picture of him, and so on. I mean, again,
I was reading something about him, Huckabee. No, I'm sorry. Was it Huckabee or what? One of them? They think Palestine, the Palestinians aren't real, like Palestine didn't exist. Something about that.
I think they have I think that is Huckabee's general disposition.
Yeah.
I think he has a what you might want to call it a religious right vision of the Middle East, and I think he wouldn't be viewed at minimum as sort of a neutral arbiter of some kind of resolution when it comes to disputes involving countries and entities, religious entities in that region.
For all
So,
the people, though, for all the Arab Americans who decided that, they didn't like the policy, the Israel-Gaza conflict policies of the United States and the Biden administration, thinking that they were going to have a protest vote, I think what they just got is something worse than what they had.
well, and that was one you could see. Like
Yeah.
I said it on this show multiple times. I mean, I
Mhm.
get it. You want a protest vote. You kind of had that protest vote in the primary there, and I put primary in quotes. But I don't see how you, if you're an Arab American who care about that region, you vote. I get it. Both sandwiches are awful, but
Mhm.
you really decided on the S sandwich more
Mhm.
than the other sandwich. This is a far more, if you only care about Palestinians and Palestinian causes, this is a far more toxic choice than was a vote for Kamala Harris.
Yep.
And finally, the CIA director is this guy, John Radcliffe. I think during Trump's first term, he was the national intelligence director. So he's someone who has some experience. Um, Anyway, we'll obviously review more as these appointments come in.
I
And
just I
yeah, go
just
ahead.
saw I just saw a comment, retired four-star general talking about the defense secretary nomination being this Fox News anchor
Yeah,
who
let's get to that real
yeah,
quick before we get to John Rothman. Pete Hegseth, is that his
yeah,
last name?
yeah.
Um, so I've been watching him for years on Fox, and let's just take a moment because I remember
The Mark Thompson Show.
Donald Trump's nominee to run the Defense Department is Pete Hegseth from Fox News. I mean, it's not like Fox News occupies a small part of his resume. It's really what he's been doing for a while now. And I know that's what you want in somebody who's going to run the Defense Department is you want somebody who can read that teleprompter really well. But Hegseth isn't someone without any credentials. He just seems overmatched by the job of running the whole effing Defense Department. Do you know how many people, how many assets you have to manage? This is an administrative job of immense proportion. And I don't see anything in his resume which would suggest that he has managed anything. I mean, he's managed to get on Fox News as a weekend anchor, and clearly he's someone who, lavishing praise on Donald Trump and being a loyal media supporter of Donald Trump, has ingratiated himself to the point that now he is going to be running the Defense Department. Here's a retired four-star general on this nomination. Quote, there's no serious experience in the business of running the Pentagon or the national security staff processes, but I'm trying to retain an open mind and hope that fresh ideas could improve things that can get pretty stale. That said, the common denominator is clearly loyalty, and while some loyalty is essential, slavish fealty is dangerous. Looking at all the announcements to date, we could end up with one mind controlling many hands. And I've never believed that one mind, any mind, does that as well as diversity of thought. That's from a four-star general on the defense secretary nomination. Do you, Albert, before I get to Rothman, do you have the videos that I sent you? Here is Pete Hegseth. And the thing I remembered was, go ahead and just roll it. I remember they did this thing this is on the street in New York. It's a crowded street, and he's doing an axe throwing thing, and he throws the axe over the backboard. Oh, here, at the beginning, show it again,
Oh,
Albert. Yeah, it hits the marchers from behind. So you see how he's throwing at the target, but bam,
oh,
it hits
Jesus.
that. Yeah, it hits the guy who's the drummer. I just remembered that. It was a weird thing. I don't know why it lodged in my memory. It was just such a strange thing, and we found the video for you. And there he is talking to the guy that he'd hit with the axe. And so it was on. There it is
Jeez.
again. Yeah. So
The
yeah, that's
guy's lucky he didn't take a blade to the face.
yeah. It hit the blunt side of the axe hit him. So that's Pete Hegseth. Now you can say, look, it was just and it obviously was just a thing, but. He also has said a couple of things that are controversial, and I just want to play a couple of them for you now. They're only like 15 seconds long. Give me the, this is one about women in the military. Go ahead, please, Albert.
I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated. We've all served with women, and they're great. It just, our institutions don't have to incentivize that in places where not traditionally, over human history, men in those positions are more capable.
Yeah, so that's his view of women in the military. Now, look, this is a guy who was in the Army National Guard. He served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and was in Guantanamo Bay. So he's one of these guys who doesn't come without any experience. But what I'd suggest is you have to manage a lot of people. Those kinds of things that you say, that puts you in an odd disposition towards administrating that staff. Do I have one more Pete Hegseth thing, and then I want to bring on John?
I don't think I've washed my hands for 10 years.
Yeah, here he is. He's on the
Really, I don't really wash my hands.
Help me!
No, I inoculate myself. It's just not, germs are not a real thing. I can't see them, therefore they're not real.
So you're becoming immune to all of the
exactly.
bacteria.
I can't get sick.
All right. So look, that could be just happy talk. I mean, again, I've worked in news and been in those happy talk situations, and you say a bunch of stuff. But the point is, he's a media darling, good-looking guy. I think Trump really is attracted to people who are attractive, and I think he's overmatched by this job. But look, defense secretary is huge. Trump's DEI, dumb employee inclusion, says Luis. Ain't it the truth? All right. Vilma says the new Trump administration appointments, no experience required, just loyalty to Trump. Yeah, there is a significant truth to just that point. And I guess we'll get Rothman to weigh in on that as well. All right.
I have a little bit of breaking news.
What is that?
Trump has just nominated Congressman Matt Gaetz for Attorney General.
Wow. That is Jeez, that's crazy.
I'm sorry I didn't have it for the newscast, but holy macaroni, man.
Wow. That is absolutely wild. Gaetz, who has ethics investigations swirling around him. That is just unreal. But that really speaks in a naked way to the fact that Trump wants loyalists in these positions and does not care about anything else. You will do what I tell you to do. You will go after who I tell you to go after. You will turn the Justice Department in any direction I tell you to turn it. That's what this nomination says. It is a clear indication of something that we've talked about for some time. But Gaetz, who again has struggled with questions around these parties, the trafficking of an underage girl, all of these things really were entered into ethics investigations, and they have not been resolved. So the idea that Gaetz would be the Attorney General, wow, what a great way to clean your record of anything and to go after your enemies.
You know those movies where, like the high school movie where there's the rich guy that's mean? There's always like that one character.
Sure.
It's like they grabbed all of them from every mean guy, the meanest of the mean guys from, every frat party in America, and dumped them in the White House. That's what it feels like.
No, I mean, Matt Gaetz is that guy. I mean, he's sort of the junior bully to Trump's senior bully, And we'll have to see, again, how this all comes together.
Wow.
But, and this is interesting, too. Wes makes this point. It's not a bad point to be made. Gaetz, that means one less Republican in the House, and for every nomination coming out of the House. It's true. Thank you for that super chat. Calvin also says, more political prosecutions by Trump, the sequel. Thanks, America. It gets worse daily, says Karen. The very worst people in the most sensitive jobs, says Nullifidian. We are now all effed up now, America, thanks to the voters, says Mindy. Yeah. The Republican politicians will go along. Of course, that's true. I mean, they are, I think, and, you know, this is the thing I was talking about in Hungary. This same kind of thing happened, which is a taking over of a political party to the point that you really don't have any mechanism to beat it back any longer. That's what I was talking about with sort of a gangster regime. Mm-hmm. So, and Eve says, I'm ill from all of this. This is causing major USA citizen shock damage, like super duper real trauma, she says.
Yeah.
We need docs online. They have offered, I've seen it online, some various programs and mechanisms to kind of chill you out. I don't know, you know, you have to pick the manner of chill out that makes, you know, sense for you.
We're gonna do a chill out next on the after party. But
Yeah.
I did get a request today for your show to have some type of psychologist on talking about the ways to cope in the next 4 years.
Well, it's funny. I was approached by my friend who we had her on before. She did a book about different ways in which you can kind of square up your life. And she's very good with this sort of thing. Maybe we'll have her on, at least for starters. So I'll put you together with her, and maybe you can help make it happen. But this Gates nomination is brutal, and you know, I'm sure, and it just follows in a list of brutal nominations that we are seeing out of this man who knows nothing, wants to know nothing, wants to go play golf, has on the agenda, I think, trying to go after his enemies, trying to pursue various vengeful strategies, but apart from that, he doesn't really care. You know, he really doesn't. So those in charge will be many of the people that you're seeing.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.